What's up guys, Sukhdeep here. So I've been using the new Magic Keyboard cases for the M4 iPad Pros for over a week now, and in this video I wanted to share my thoughts and give my review. So in terms of pricing, the new Magic Keyboard costs the same as the one before. It's $299 for the 11-inch and $349 for the 13-inch. But one thing to note is that this case is only compatible with the new M4 iPad Pros, and if you've upgraded to the M4s, they will only work with the new Magic Keyboard case, which I know some people on the internet have been frustrated by, because it means that if you want to upgrade your old iPad, you have to upgrade the Magic Keyboard as well, which is far from ideal. In terms of design though, Apple have kept the overall look of the Magic Keyboard pretty much the same. It still retains that iconic floating design with the 3-pin connector that makes it really easy to magnetically attach and detach the iPad from, which I've always been a massive fan of. I think it makes viewing content on the iPad a lot more immersive than on a MacBook because of the way it positions the iPad closer to your face. But they've actually changed the hinge design slightly this year so that the iPad is now positioned a bit further back, which I'm guessing they were able to achieve because the iPads are now slightly lighter. And that might explain why the older iPads don't support this. But yeah, it has allowed them to fit in a full set of function row keys at the top. So you can now do things like adjust the brightness, volume, play and pause music, activate Do Not Disturb, all without having to open up Control Center. And because of the new hinge, you can also tilt the iPad a bit further back now, which gives you a more comfortable viewing angle when you're using the keyboard in your lap. And if that wasn't enough, Apple have somehow managed to increase the size of the trackpad as well. It's not a huge difference, but it will make dragging text across the display a bit easier, especially because the trackpad now supports haptic feedback. So on the previous Magic Keyboard, the trackpad was a physical button that you had to click on, but now when you press down, there's no actual click. You just get a vibration that sort of simulates a click. It's basically like how it is on the MacBook. But yeah, it's a really nice quality of life improvement because it means that you don't have to apply as much force in order to trigger a click using the trackpad. And the trackpad also won't make as much noise when you're clicking on it. And it just feels a bit more premium overall. The USB-C charging port on the left has also been upgraded, so it now supports up to 60 watts of charging compared to just 22 watts previously, which is a pretty big increase, and it should make charging a lot faster and a lot easier, whilst freeing up the Thunderbolt port on the iPad. One thing to note though is that this port can still only be used for charging, so if you wanted to connect any peripherals like an SSD, you'd have to do that through the iPad itself. Another thing Apple have changed with this Magic Keyboard is the material, so the inside where you rest your hands and the hinge on the outside are now made from aluminium, which I have to say just feels a lot more premium, a lot more nice and solid and MacBook-like. Yeah, I'm a really big fan of the change. The aluminium has a slightly lighter shade than the old material on the black model, but it means that the keypads should collect less dust and dirt over time, and it should be more durable, which was a big issue on my previous Magic Keyboard. And it'll also be easier to clean off the smudges with a microfiber cloth. One thing to note though is that it's just the inside and the hinge on the outside that are made from aluminium, so the outside of the case is still made from the same rubbery sort of material as before. So I'm expecting the durability will be pretty similar there. In fact, I've already gotten quite a few scuffs and marks on the outside of my Magic Keyboard after a week, and I haven't even taken them traveling with me yet. To be fair, I can sort of see why Apple didn't just construct the entire case using aluminium, because if they did, I feel like the entire case would just get too heavy. And in fact, the new Magic Keyboards are actually lighter this year as well. So the 11-inch model weighs just 578 grams compared to 601 grams before, and the 13-inch weighs 664 grams compared to 710 previously. And in real life, I think that you definitely do notice the difference, especially because Apple have also reduced the weight of the iPad Pro models this year as well. So they're slimmer and lighter, and when you combine that with the lighter keyboard, it definitely does make that 13-inch iPad Pro a lot more portable of a package than what I was expecting. And the 11-inch model is barely noticeable when carrying it around. That said, it's not going to completely change the dynamic between the 11-inch and the 13-inch iPads. I still prefer my 11-inch for travel simply because it's a lot lighter. And even though the 13-inch iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard now weighs less than it did before, it still feels a bit cumbersome to carry around. So if you were previously on the fence about that, the weight reduction probably isn't going to sway your mind, at least from my experience. Also, the iPad is still quite top heavy, so even though Apple have tried to increase the weight of the base using aluminium, whilst reducing the weight of the iPads at the top, technically if you leave the iPad lying at an angle, it probably will tip over. And I find that if I'm using the iPad on my lap for extended periods of time, my wrists do start to fatigue from having to press down the keyboard on my laps. It's not too much of an issue with the 11-inch, but it's definitely noticeable on the larger 13-inch model. But realistically, in most of the scenarios, it's usually more than fine. I haven't really had any issues with the iPad just tipping over when I'm using it on the sofa or in bed. So on the whole, I'd say that Apple have basically perfected the design on the new Magic keyboards. The only pet peeve that I do have is that I'm not a huge fan of this new white color and the contrast between the white keys and the off-white base. With the black option, it's not too bad, and in fact, the black option is a shade darker on the outside than the previous generation. But yeah, that's something to bear in mind. Now, you'll have noticed that I haven't mentioned the typing experience at all so far, which is quite weird considering that this is a keyboard review. But that's because the typing experience is basically the same as it was before. The only difference that I can notice is that the typing feels a bit less mushy than it did previously. But I think that's purely because Apple are now using aluminium, so you don't have to apply as much force for the keys to click. The keys still give you 1 millimeter of travel, which is identical to what you get with the keyboards on the new MacBooks. Having said that, I think I actually prefer the typing experience on the Magic Keyboard for the iPad compared to the Mac. There's just something about it that feels a lot more satisfying to type on. In fact, it's probably my favorite typing experience on any keyboard that I've ever used. And the entire script for this YouTube video was typed on the 11-inch Magic Keyboard, for what that's worth. On that note, a lot of you will probably be wondering how the 11-inch keyboard compares to the 13-inch, because obviously on the smaller version, they did have to reduce the size of some of the keys in order to fit everything in. And yeah, I'd say that the typing experience is pretty much identical. The only thing that I will caution is that if you're typing at this thing for hours on end, you may or may not notice some discomfort from your hands being so close together. For shorter typing sessions, it's fine. So if all you're doing is browsing the web, replying to emails, commenting on my YouTube videos, you should have no issues with doing that. But if I was writing an essay, I'll notice that my hands do begin to feel a bit cramped after an hour of continuous use. Whereas with the 13-inch keyboard, I haven't really experienced that yet. So that's something to bear in mind. So, do I recommend that you go out and purchase the new Magic Keyboard case if you own an M4 iPad Pro? Well, I think that if you've got the 13-inch iPad Pro, then I almost sort of view having the Magic Keyboard as being essential to unlocking that full iPad experience and making it more of a laptop replacement. With the 11-inch, however, I do consider it to be a bit more of an optional purchase, since you're probably not going to be using it for extended writing or as your main computer, beyond just replying to emails or quickly taking notes and browsing the web. And because of how expensive it is, I don't think you should be in a rush to get one. But if you are looking to take your iPad workflow to the next level and to turn this into more of a tablet laptop hybrid, then I definitely would recommend that you go for the Magic Keyboard case. But yeah, let me know what you think of the new Magic Keyboard in the comments down below. Consider leaving a like if you found this video helpful and subscribe for the next one.